We live in a very odd and confusing time when it comes to international and national politics in America. For you see, as stated by Reuters just 3 days ago, Trump has again delayed tariffs on China, specifically within their microchip and general production industries, which is directly contradictory to past statements that state, and I quote, "We're going to nuke them to hell with tariffs." Which really begs the question, why? Why is this delay happening now? Why is this even being brought up at all? Does this show weakness within America? In other words, does Trump's reversal on Chinese tariffs signal the US has weakened geopolitically against China? Now, fortunately or unfortunately, the answer seems to be no, for two reasons for and one against. Firstly, Trump's just general stupidity. Secondly, political and judicial backlash happening internally within America. And the one thing that does actually show why that's the case, the general Chinese and American economics. Now that we understand exactly what will be happening in this speech, let's talk about Trump's general stupidity. As stated by The Guardian just 5 days ago, Trump has an odd history during his most recent administration of delaying tariffs, the most primary example being delaying the 25% tariff that he was going to put on the EU in April. The reason why he did that is because most of the EU countries immediately tried to push for a deal with America, and he didn't know what to do at the time. In other words, he has a history of saying that he's going to produce these tariffs, but then just not doing so because the country wants to have a conversation. And China has repeatedly attempted to have conversations with America, which means this is just a continuation of the tendency of Trump to say he's going to put tariffs on and then not doing so because he doesn't feel like it. In addition to that, as stated by AP News just 3 days ago, he's just completely indecisive on how much and how he wants to implement these tariffs. By that article, the same day, he stated to one news source that he was going to put a 50% tariff on China, and another news source that he was only going to put 25% tariffs on China, showing a complete inability for him to control his own policy actions and an inability to determine how and when these policy actions are going to take place. Not really, meaning that it doesn't really show any change or shift in geopolitical ties between America and China. Secondly, we need to talk about the political and judicial backlash happening internally within America. You see, as stated by the Washington Street Journal just 2 hours ago, a court ruling by the CIT with international jurisdiction homed in New York State stated that the primary legal argument Trump was using to be able to make tariffs is null and void. You see, Trump has stated multiple times that EPA, which is a political action giving the Trump to make emergency tariffs under the assumption that it is a strict militaristic or economic emergency, that it's done completely by a foreign country outside of America, and that the specific tariff enacted is the only way to fix this issue. And CIT stated that they meet none of these conditions. It's not an emergency. It's not exclusively outside of America or by any specific country. And tariffs aren't even a good way to solve it, much less the only way to solve it. As a result of this fact, the judicial system in America is preventing these tariffs from being enacted. Going back to the idea that this really doesn't have anything to do with geopolitics between America and China, instead just general politics between America and America itself. In addition to that, we have to look at the political backlash as well. As stated by Bloomberg just 3 days ago, Canada is also pressuring the US to not use tariffs. Canada makes up 60% of all American oil, and America won't be able to switch to purely American oil for the next decade, even though they do actually make enough oil for that to be theoretically possible. Which means Canada is integral to America's economic functioning, as oil is the primary energy source used for the entirety of the American economic system. Meaning what Canada says is pretty much what Canada does and what America has to do to follow. And again, goes to show this severe lack of geopolitical shift between America and China. Now let's take a second to extract the truth from the topic, as no real topic is fully false, and understanding where it is true is incredibly important. American and Chinese economics is very integral for both countries. And you see, as stated by Statistica released in 2024, 31.8% of all microchips in the US come from China. Microchips being one of the most important imports from other countries into America, and again is a necessary for America to function as an economic powerhouse, which means immediately putting, as stated by the BBC, a 125% tariff significantly destroys the economic relations between America and China. In addition to this, China is America's second biggest trading partner, which means ruining those ties by putting such a large amount of tariffs completely destroys America's ability to function on the international stage, meaning he doesn't want to do them at all. However, once we go back to the question itself, does Trump's reversal on Chinese tariffs signal the U.S. as weakening geopolitically against China? The answer is ultimately no. Firstly, because of Trump's general stupidity. Secondly, because of political and judicial backlash. And the only real truth in the topic being American economics with China.